Riley Gaines. I am excited to announce that Outkick has hired her to be doing a podcast all about defending women's sports. And Riley, we're excited to have you. And I've got a quote for you. The timing is unbelievable on this. Megan Rapinoe is announced that she is retiring. The U.S. Women's World Cup is just about to start in Australia and New Zealand. And in an interview in Time magazine, Riley, I don't even know if you've seen these quotes yet. I'm going to read them for you. She was asked, Megan Rapinoe was, would you welcome a trans athlete? Rapinoe said, absolutely. You're taking a real woman's place. That's the part of the argument that's still extremely transphobic. I see trans women as real women. What you're saying automatically in the argument, you're sort of telling on yourself already, is you don't believe these people are women, therefore they're taking the other spot. I don't feel that way. And she said later, oh, now we care about fairness. Now we care about women's sports. That's total bull. You know what it comes after. And show me all the trans people who are nefariously taking advantage of being trans in sports. It's just not happening, Rapinoe said. What would you say in response, Riley?
Look, this is predictable, to be honest. We could have imagined that she would have said absolutely. Of course she did when she just announced her career was over. Had Megan Rapinoe been asked this question in the height of her career, trying to advance to the height of her career, she would not have the same opinions. And it's easy to understand why. It's because a man could easily take her place. Easily. And in regards to how this is telling on yourselves, that goes more our way than anything, because at our national championships, they had to change the rules to the locker room to allow a man into our locker room. They had to say, oh, well, we got around this by making the locker rooms unisex. That right there is admitting that it's not a woman. It's a full admittance. These organizations who are buying into this, they know it's wrong. They know it's unfair. And Megan Rapinoe is virtue signaling, which is not a surprise to anyone.
You know, what do you think? And Riley, it's Buck. What do you think the response should be to this? Because we know it's only a matter of time before you do have a male to female transition who is trying to play at a high level of women's soccer. You came up against this in swimming. It's happened elsewhere. Do you think that the female players should just refuse to play? I mean, this is often something that comes up. What's the proper response given that this is just going to continue?
You know, for the longest time, I rejected the notion of boycott. I thought women shouldn't have to compromise anything. There's no sacrifice that we should make. But now, let me tell you, as I see more and more girls get injured, I see more and more girls lose out on opportunities, more and more girls exploited in a locker room, boycotting is the answer. That's how this is going. That's how we're effectively going to make change. I thought legislation would be the way forward. But really, the turning point for me in embracing a boycott is when this got introduced on the House at the federal level by Representative Greg Steube, the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, and all Democrats, every single one of them, all 203, voted in opposition of protecting women and girls in sports. And that's when I realized if we wait for legislation to make changes, it's too far gone. Too many women will have lost out. Too many women, again, will have their rights to privacy entirely violated. And be potentially injured in their sports. So I most certainly am advocating and calling for a boycott, not just from women. I think men could boycott too. Men need to make a statement. I think that's a powerful way to show that this is something that affects everyone and that everyone has had enough.
You shared a story over the weekend, I think it was, that I couldn't believe it was real. And I want you to fill in for people out there who may not have heard about it. There was a 16-year-old girl who objected to a biological man pretending to be a woman using a YMCA, I believe I've got this correct, locker room. What happened to her? What is this story for people who have not heard it?
So I've talked to this family. The story is every single day after their practice, at the same time, a man would be undressing in their locker room. And these girls, of course, they felt uncomfortable by this. And so they went to their coach immediately and said, hey, there's a man in our locker room every single day. Can you do something about it? And he assured them, of course I'll do something, but it continued to happen every single day. And so these girls, they met together, they took it upon themselves to do something. And so they got together, they wrote little posters, and on these posters, which were eventually deemed as hate speech, they wrote protect women's sports. They wrote, women's space only, certain things like that. Nothing even about trans individuals. Just it was a pro-woman message. And they put these posters up in the locker room, and that next day at practice, their coach pulls them together and says, "Who did this?" And the one girl steps forward and she said, "Well, I was a part in it." And he said, "You're off the team immediately and you're kicked off out of the YMCA." And so she was banned from the YMCA for opposing a male who is undressing to be in their locker room.
I want to emphasize this again because am I correct, Riley? This is a 16-year-old girl, a minor, and her teammates are also minors. And this girl, bore the consequences for saying, hey, there shouldn't be a man changing in our locker room who's arguing that he's a woman. She was the one who had to bear the consequences.
You're right. That's exactly right. And it's crazy. And I think to make matters even worse, not only did these parents have to deal with this daughter, their older daughter, her name is Caitlin Wheeler. She was on my team at University of Kentucky, and we were training partners, and she's one of my best friends. And she dealt with this when competing and changing in a locker room with Leah Thomas. And so now these poor parents have dealt with this from two of their daughters, yet people continually push the argument, it's not really happening. It's not really a big deal. It's not happening. It is happening. It happened to this family twice. One of the young track and field girls out in California who competed against a boy, her older sister competed against Leah Thomas as well. These are two families who have been impacted in two entirely different situations, but in the same way.
Riley, you may have seen this. It's not quite sports, but it is a competition that the Miss Netherlands competition which is a feeder to the Miss Universe competition, was won. This is a female beauty pageant. It was won by a transgender man or transgender woman. Is this the next thing we should expect, where like women's pageants and other things also are now going to be won by men?
Look, there's a realm of things we can expect this in, not just beauty pageants, but prisons, in women's shelters and sororities. And notice this is only going one way. It is always narcissistic, entitled men entering in the women's division. We don't see women going in men's bathrooms. We don't see women going into men's prisons. And it's because these men are on power trips. And look, I have no animosity towards, let's say, Leah Thomas, for example. Look, Leah Thomas was following the rules. It's the rules that need to change that allowed this, because what message are these rules sending? And I can tell you from my experience, the message I got, and it's that I don't matter. That we as women, as girls, as female athletes, we didn't matter. Our privacy, our safety, our fairness, our self-perception of ourselves, our mental health, our dignity, I mean, the list goes on. None of that matters. What matters to corporate America, to academia, to the media, to actually the Biden administration who is leading this country, what matters to them is catering to the radical minority, with us as women being collateral damage.
I think the answer is, Riley, that as part of your Outkick podcast, you'd be very happy to talk to somebody like Megan Rapinoe. So when Megan Rapinoe says, it's total BS, show me all the trans people who are nefariously taking advantage of being trans in sports, it's just not happening. For people out there who may not have heard your story, Riley, you can tell us about what the podcast is going to do, but legitimately the reason that you are talking to us is because a man ended up winning a women's NCAA championship, and you competed against that man identifying as a woman. And so you were planning on being, I believe, a vet. Like, you would be in veterinary school right now, but for the fact that this competitive situation directly happened in NCAA women's championship sports.
You're exactly right. This is never something I wanted for myself. This is never something I felt equipped for. I mean, heck, I still don't feel equipped for what I'm doing. But I know what's at stake if I don't do it. And to answer your question, I would love to have Megan Rapinoe on your podcast. I actually consider this an official invite. Megan Rapinoe, I would love it if you join the new Gains for Girls podcast, where we can have an open dialogue about the issue of men competing in women's sports. Nancy Armour, consider this your open invitation as well. This is the woman who deems Sam Ponder as a bigot for believing in biology, and she claims that I am some right-wing grifter who's just trying to climb the ladder off of tying against Leah Thomas. No, Nancy, I would love to have a conversation with you. This is definitely a space where I hope to spread awareness and ultimately, more than anything, spread the truth.
Well, congratulations on Outkick. I hear the guy who founded it he's pretty cool. He's okay. And I hear you're launching a podcast. When does that start?
I actually just filmed my first episode. I think the plan is for it to come out on Wednesday, so we'll see.
Riley Gaines, everybody. Go find her at Outkick.
She's going to kill it, Buck, and I bet you're going to find out that all the people who disagree with her, when offered an open forum to come and explain their audience and their opinion, they'll run and hide. They won't do it.